CBC and their government money killing off the competition. I'm Brian Lilly with the Rebel.media. A TV channel in Quebec, one owned by my former Sun News Network employer, Quebecor, is going to be shut down. The reason given was clear. Competing to be profitable against an ever-growing state broadcaster was just too difficult. So Quebecor is shutting down Argent. That's their business channel. Julie Tremblay, the president and CEO of Quebecor Media, put it as bluntly as could be in a statement posted on the company's website. She said, when the government sends hundreds of millions of dollars to the public broadcaster, closing Argent illustrates the difficulties faced by private broadcasters in a rapidly changing industry. There's no doubt the industry is rapidly changing. This shutdown, though, is substantial for several reasons. First, you have to realize that Quebecor is no slouch in the Francophone Quebec market. They dominate in the TV space, and they used to in magazines and newspapers, but that market is changing as well. But on the TV side, on the broadcast side, they still dominate. The most recent ratings period of March 30th to April 3rd shows that the top 10 shows in Quebec, well, of the top 10 shows, 7 were on a Quebecor network. In fact, of the top 30, 20 shows were on the flagship station TVA. But the entire media model is changing, and private broadcasters are watching viewing habits change, but perhaps more importantly, ad buying habits are changing. Millions of dollars a year just evaporating from traditional TV ad buys as businesses, local and national, look to spend their money elsewhere. It's difficult for everybody. Quebecor and Argent were having to deal with this reality, but CBC is immune, especially under this current government. Justin Trudeau and the Liberals, they've promised an extra $150 million a year for the state broadcaster. That's more than the Conservatives ever took away. I know the claim is out there, the Conservatives just starved CBC. But did you know that most year the Conservatives were in power, they increased CBC's funding? When they did cut, it was to end a program that had been started years earlier as a temporary funding measure. But those funds, that $1.1 billion a year that CBC gets, that's money not available to the private broadcasters, and CBC uses it to undermine the private broadcasters. Now, there is funding for those in the private sector, but these are funds specifically set up for the creation of Canadian content. It's funds that you and I pay for either through our taxes or fees put on the cable companies that gets passed on to us. But even that funding, the funding that's pointed to as going to the private broadcasters, the majority of that money, it gets sucked up by CBC. Those of us in the private broadcasting system have long argued that CBC uses their huge subsidy to unfairly compete. And it's true, they do. This is just the latest example of it and the havoc it wreaks. So too is the recent hiring by CBC of former Globe and Mail reporter turned Twitter executive Steve Laturante. He's joining CBC to head up their digital push. I don't blame Laturante for taking this plum job, but I have to wonder why it exists. I'm not saying CBC shouldn't have a website. Of course they should. But did you know they have a whole division, an army of reporters whose sole job it is to write stories not for TV or radio, but for the web, competing not only with every newspaper in the country, but news websites like The Rebel or Press Progress and National Observer on the left or BuzzFeed in their list of cats? Where in their mandate does it say that CBC should be doing this? It doesn't. But once again, CBC will use the $1.1 billion a year they get to undermine the competition. Today, it's Argent shutting down. Someday, in the not-too-distant future, it'll be your local newspaper, then your local TV and radio station, and eventually, CBC. Well, people might realize the damage that the state broadcaster and their subsidy is inflicting on Canadian news and the Canadian media industry.
Thanks for watching. Click here to never miss a Rebel update. Want even more of the Rebel? Well, click here to become a premium member.